Welcome back, everyone. This is week 2 of your material culture course. Before we get started, I just wanted you to know that this is the time now where you need to make sure that you've handed in your assignments and that you are ready to now enter this week's topic. You can upload your picture as well as a summary of what the object is and why you've chosen it to relate to the theme of material culture underneath the tab for week 1 where the assignment option is open for you. You can also put any of your comments or questions there for the class to see, for me to see, and for me to reply. Now, without any further ado, let's get started. Our first topic for this week is what is material culture? So, material culture is defined as an individual's social reality that is based around objects and architecture that surround us. Thus, this is the individual's relation to the space they occupy, as well as the objects within that space. The above characteristic of material culture includes the usage, consumption, creation, trade of objects and/or behaviors, norms, and rituals that the objects create or partake in. As we had discussed last week, defining culture is complex and understanding the term is important. And therefore, during the 1990s, it was defined in three ways. Culture as a special, intellectual, or artistic endeavor or product. Culture as a quality possessed by all people in all social groups. And culture, the uniqueness of the many and varied cultures of different peoples or societies. When it comes to material culture, this then falls in with these three definitions as well, due to the fact that these material culture objects or spaces can be defined as special intellectual artistic endeavor or product, therefore falling under popular culture, or it can also be a quality that possessed by all people in all social groups. Through the material culture perspective, this would then be an object or a space that people within this cultural group occupy on traditionally or after a certain amount of time. It can also be defined under the uniqueness of the many and varied cultures of different peoples or societies, as these can be spaces or objects that only people of the specific cultural or ethnical group use or occupy at certain spaces or times. The following slide shows you three examples of material culture. The first image is an image of a woman who is dressed in very traditional female attire for married women. This is because the skirt and the t-shirt in this image worn by this woman are longer, whereas for unmarried women it would be a little bit shorter. When it comes to their traditional attire as well, there are different colors for different areas. And she's now wearing the blue and pink, which means that she's from a specific area in Limpopo or Polokwane, where the Bedi people are originally from. The second image is a hut which is owned by the Ndebele ethnic group members, and this hut is decorated by paintings that show the design and pattern that they specialize in. The third image is a traditional meal. It is called malamogodu, which is tripe, and it's a traditional dish amongst many South African cultures, such as the people of the Bedi community that we've seen in the first image. These three images are considered examples of material culture because they show a space that people can occupy, as well as objects such as clothing and a dish, a meal. A meal can also be seen as material culture. Furthermore, culture and society are thus looked at as being ways in which society and its social relations can be understood. These objects, resources, and spaces are used to define people's culture. Furthermore, they help us to define members of that culture's behavior as well as perceptions. This concept of understanding the relationship between people and things is known as objectification. If we refer back to last week's lecture, where we went on to discuss the way in which the three terms of culture can also be used and characterized today, this slide then shows that culture can be manifested at different layers, and it also shows that culture affects behavior and interpretations of the behavior. This is seen and is further backed up by the fact that these objects, resources, and spaces define how the people of specific cultures behave and how they go about their everyday lives or used to go about their everyday lives, and therefore showing also the progress of culture and how this continuously evolves and does not stay the same in all aspects all the time. This also furthermore shows that culture is learned. This is seen through how, through generations, the use of these objects and spaces is passed on from one generation to another generation. This can be done orally, or it can also be done through theoretically through writings. Sometimes it also just happens through observation, where the younger generation just observes how the older generation do things and therefore continue to do it at their time. When it comes to material culture, we now enter the new topic of representations, identity, and expressions. These are three themes that occur through material culture. Below are the definitions. Representation is defined as the way in which someone or something is portrayed through actions, such as speaking or acting on behalf of someone or the state of that which is being portrayed. Identity is defined as a fact of being who or what a thing is. This can also include similarities and/or affinity. Expression is defined as the method of making one's feelings and/or thoughts known to others. These three terms exist in material culture as they shape how people interact with objects. These three themes also show how spaces are occupied and how people exist within, and how these objects and resources and spaces exist within material culture. Through material culture, representation, identity, and expression can be achieved. This can be done through actions or through voice. When it comes to actions, this can also include art and movement as well. Through this course, our main aim is going to be looking at expression and its relation to material culture, specifically fashion within the sub-Saharan continent, South African continent. For We will get into that though as the weeks progress, of course. But for this week, I just want you guys to understand the connection between material culture as well as expression. So, expression is defined as a method of making one's feelings and/or thoughts known to others, and this can be done through an act, process, or a medium such as literature or visuals. Now, a good example of expression, and as well as the link between material culture and expression, is a series on Netflix called Pose. This is something that I watched when I was learning material culture, and I always seem to refer back to it because it has such great examples of how expression can be achieved. Now, I'm not going to tell you too much about the series. Some of you may have seen it, but it attacks various socio-economic issues, as well as political issues, and it addresses various LGBTQIA plus issues and concerns, and this is done through mainly the form of drag and music and movement. So if you're someone that absolutely loves the artistic side of things and the movement and dance, and this is something that you will definitely enjoy, and you will be able to see how through not just talking but through dance and drag, the various characters have found representation and have found their own identities and have been able to create identities as well and express themselves. and show their relation, the relation that occurs between themselves and the space that they occupy, whether it be the ball or just down the road as a queer individual. So I do strongly suggest that you do give the show a watch. Just watch the first episode, and I mean, obviously, if you like it, continue. But it is definitely a great example of people and relating to spaces and objects and resources and how we can use those to to express ourselves and to identify with each other or to find our own identities and to find representation, and how this actually does create a culture. And in this case, this is then the culture that exists between LGBTQIA plus communities. All right. Well, now that we understand expression and we understand material culture and how these two relate to each other, the question is, how can they and how do they actually relate to each other, and how can material culture be viewed as a form of expression? Now, one of the aims of studying material culture is to see how culture integrates with the self, definition, and self maintenance. It's a balance between the self and the world. Like we said earlier, it is that relationship that occurs between people, objects, spaces, and resources. And through this relationship, the self is then defined. And how does this definition of the self then continue, and how does it progress? Through material culture, we are also able to see how certain individuals or groups of individuals interact with particular spaces, as well as the progression and movement that occurs within these spaces. Now, also remember that within these spaces, there are objects that you will also encounter and be in relation with, and these then continue to define the culture of the space or of the object, and furthermore now is now a part of material culture and is a part of how it, and like is the will show you now how it represents, identifies, or expresses the specific culture or the specific situation, um, or platform that that culture needs at that point in time. So that is all for this week. Please do make sure to go through the slide. I will attach additional readings for further understanding, and you may also watch that episode on pause to get any more clarification that you need. I will be available to take any questions or comments. Please do not hesitate to contact me. Let me know what's on your mind. Let's talk. And be sure to go through the week looking around you and seeing how you relate to various spaces and objects. And if anything you find interesting, let me know or let the class know, and let's talk about it. Thank you so much for attending this week's lecture. I'm looking forward to week 3 next week.